If you sat in school and did absolutely nothing and they failed you, would you be surprised? I don't think so. But if you gave it everything you had and got an A, see, the difference is some people come in here and it's not that important to them. Therefore, I believe, like it says, those who really tried are the people who come in here and make it. And anyway, what I was getting at was that the fear, we believe that fear is at the root. It is the cause of the obsession. Once you have cleared the addiction that your body has to alcohol, once you have gotten rid of, the detox, and Bill Wilson even says, if you look in the early AA, all of these early AA people came from hospitals and sanitariums. When Bill Wilson got back to New York, he didn't find Dr. Bob at the hospital. He found him through Walter Tunk and some priest guy. He found him from a priest, and Dr. Bob had been to the detox a number of times anyway. But anyway, the story is, where did Bill and Bob go? They went straight to that hospital in Akron, Ohio, where they found AA number 3 and 4, 5, and that's where it even says that Dr. Bob administered to 5,000 alcoholics, all from that Akron hospital, all from that hospital. He didn't find them at the AA meeting. He didn't find them at the drunk or wherever, at the jail or something. He found them at that hospital. And when Bill Wilson got back to New York, where did he go? He went straight to those 2 hospitals, Towns Hospital and Knickerbocker Hospital. Those 2 hospitals is where he found all the people that they started. The first buses that came in from AA came in from those hospitals. But once your body has been thoroughly cleansed of its dependence on alcohol, it then becomes a matter of your mental defense against the first drink, on the idea that you develop an obsession for the first one. It's not just a thought. You don't go, hey, should I have a drink? No, I don't think so. It becomes an obsession. That's all you think about. I got to have a drink. And the next thing you know, you're drunk. And the way we believe in AA is that obsession, it comes from fear. And we believe that because the people who have made an attempt to conquer this fear have developed a defense against that first drink. And that's why he says we will find that this has happened automatically. Because, as the 4th step puts it, we have gotten to the underlying causes and conditions that are at the root of the obsession for the first drink, which is fear. Fear is, and the other forms we have are anger and guilt, and those two are rooted and based in fear. That they come from, that we would have no guilt if we weren't afraid of the consequences of being dishonest versus honest. We would have no anger unless it was that all anger is rooted in fear. When we make our list of resentments, on that 3rd category, that 3rd line in that thing, it says fear. Notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties of Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones, the employer, and the wife. That's essentially saying that every single thing that you are angry about is really something that you're afraid of. But it manifests in anger in most of us. Back to the reading. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. We're combating fear, and we're given this immunity to that first drink. It just comes. That's the miracle of it. We are not fighting it, and neither are we avoiding temptation. And most people would say, hey, that sounds insane. If you knew how I was living my life, there's no way that I could come to this point. We feel as though we had been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We've not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us. Remember, what we're dealing with here is the idea that fear is the driving force and that we are attempting to free ourselves of this fear. One of the things that he says is about this this God consciousness that was mentioned back in the 5th step, where he says we have begun to become God conscious. And then when we went over that, we said, now wait a minute, what does that mean? That in the 5th step, I have begun to become God conscious. That somehow I start to feel the presence of God in my life, because we are instructed here to bring God into these spiritual solutions. When I am angry, as the 4th step puts it, I write it down. I make those 3 columns. Who am I angry at? What the cause of the anger, what it is that they did that made me angry, and what part of my life that it affects, my self-esteem, my personal relations, and that it is all based in fear. And then we are instructed to share this with another human being, tell someone else that I'm angry at something that someone else has done, and then we're instructed to ask God to help us forgive this person. We're asked, in the 3rd step, he says, we could not be rid of self without God's help. And why is it that we can't be rid of self without God's help? Because this is an instinctual thing that's running our lives. That when I get angry, I don't make a decision to get angry. I don't sit down on a piece of paper and go, okay, I'm going to get angry about this because of that guy. Remember, you're instinctually, you ever see people fight? And can you stop and say to yourself, that's a grown man or a grown woman doing that? Do you think that if they had time to really think about something like a parking spot out in the, two people fighting over a parking spot, and you can say to yourself, are you really grown people fighting over a parking spot out there, or something just as stupid as that? Anything. I mean, there may be some serious things to fight over, but most things you might see are really quite trivial. It's just that these people feel threatened, and they feel like there's someone's walking on them, and their instincts, my security, my self-esteem, that's a big one. Self-esteem getting stomped on by somebody. Here we go. Let's fight it out. But the spiritual solutions instruct us to bring God into each one of these. God, please help me to forgive this person that I'm angry at. Not because that guy, he needs the loving hand of, because I need to find what's blocking me from God. That's what. I can't stop drinking. And here I am storming mad for 3 days over some stupid something or other. I have to have God's help to get rid of this stuff, okay? And I have to learn to forgive people, not because I think that they need to be forgiven and God is a loving, but because I'm a stark raving lunatic when it comes to drinking, and I got to do something, so I must learn to put out of my mind the anger for what other people do that I feel like they're stomping all over me. I'm feeling like I'm threatened by them. I have to get rid of that anger. It is the chief stumbling block to being an emissary of God's outpouring unconditional love for others, towards others. It's what's going to get me close to God, and God is going to keep me safe and protected, as this is stating here. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. This is how our experience. This was our experience. This is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. Fit spiritual condition, once again, a reference to finding these three most common manifestations of self, anger, fear, and guilt, that block us from receiving and doing. Now, all these are words from the previous pages that block us from receiving and doing God's will, which is a life of self-work and sacrifice for others, is how Bill puts it in his story. For if a person failed to enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not overcome the low spots that lie ahead. It is easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. We are headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. We are not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Every day is a day we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. What is this vision of God's will? Back to the third step. I am to be an agent of God's outflowing unconditional love towards other people. And what's blocking me from doing that is anger, fear, and guilt. Okay, we have the spiritual solutions to those: 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. 8 and 9 we make amends. 6 and 7 we learn to forgive. And 5 we admit. And then 12 is the faith in God, which is where we're headed with all this. One of the things that I tell my sponsees is, I'll be done in a few minutes. We'll open up the floor for discussion. It's my interpretation of the steps that you don't wait to have a spiritual awakening to start helping other people through the 12 steps. Because if you do, you'll never have it. And I'll explain what I'm talking about. First of all, Ebby Thatcher was the guy that sponsored Bill Wilson through another group called the Oxford Groups, where they had unofficial 6 steps and an official 4 absolutes: the absolute purity, absolute honesty, absolute unselfishness, and absolute love. And Ebby Thatcher was instructed that he would be free of his alcoholism if he helped other people. They didn't say alcoholics, but he thought to himself, I know the perfect guy. My childhood friend, Bill Wilson. Now, this is just a story, because if you want what they have, you do what they did. And to see the most basic, simple idea of Alcoholics Anonymous and how it works is to take, for example, one of our, the guy that started the thing, Bill Wilson, and to see how it happened for him and how it's happened for millions of people since, including myself. You take Ebby Thatcher helps Bill Wilson through the steps, and Bill Wilson gets sober and never drinks again. Never takes another drink as long as he lived. Bill Wilson, however, has Ebby Thatcher for a sponsor. Ebby Thatcher drinks. Ebby Thatcher was able to carry the message of, helping others to be free of self, to get out of self, you do things for others. He was able to carry that message to Bill successfully, but he did not have, obviously, he did not have the spiritual awakening, or he wouldn't have drank again. Therefore, I don't think that it's, as the 12th step instructs us, it says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, period. And it says, okay, take, for example, take the idea that now you have had a spiritual awakening. At that point, you can begin to help other people have their spiritual awakening because you have experienced it, and someone who has experienced it could better explain it to someone else. Therefore, you cannot start helping other people until you have had a spiritual experience. And if you ask yourself, okay, so what is the determining point in my sobriety in which I can stop and say, I have had my spiritual experience now. I am sure of it. There's the event, there's the day that it happened, there's the time that it happened. I have had my spiritual experience, because for me that point has never actually happened. I've got over 20 years of sobriety, and the only thing I can say was there was one day when I was looking at the third step. I was in jail again. This is 20 years ago. And I was looking at the third step, and I said, okay, I get it. I turned my life over to God unconditionally. My only reason for living is to serve God, and if that don't work, then I'm out of here. And for me, there was a certain point that I could say, but for as far as those other years that go along with that, I can tell you that there was no real point that I could say that I could pinpoint and say, that was the day I had my spiritual experience, my spiritual awakening. They're the same thing, by the way. I've heard many people say, what's the difference between them? The difference is Bill wrote spiritual experience, and this editorial board that wrote God as We Understand Him didn't like that word, so they put, that's the only place awakening appears, is right there. He's got 3 or 4 other places where he says spiritual experience. So the point being that you don't stop and wait, because our spiritual solution to fear is unconditional love, doing things for others. The 12th step is the spiritual solution to fear. And if you wait, this is what a lot of my sponsees are doing. They're saying, well, you know, I don't really feel qualified to take other people through the 12 steps because I don't have a real working knowledge. And the only thing I can say to them is, look, neither did I. When I first started helping other people, I had no idea what the hell I was doing. But you have to start at some point and begin to make this transition into somebody who starts thinking of other people and doing things for other people. Even though, and I hear there's a woman who keeps attacking me in here, and she says, you're dealing with people's lives here, and you're going to sponsor somebody, and you don't know what you're doing. You could kill them. And my only answer to that is, yeah, but what if you do nothing? So your 2 points are that, 1, you do absolutely nothing, make no attempt to help them whatsoever, or have some idea what you're doing, maybe a little bit, and try to help them a little bit. Try anything is better than nothing, right? And her argument is, you're dealing with people's lives, and they need someone who's experienced and knows what they're doing. And then how the hell are we ever going to get people who are experienced if you don't start from point A, where you didn't know what you were doing, and you started helping people and said, okay, let's get going. And I tell you how I started. I was forced to do it by my sponsor. My sponsor grabbed some other guy who asked him by the scruff of the neck, and he grabbed me, and he pointed us together, and he said, you and you. And they had about 4 other guys around him, and he goes, you and you, you and you, and you and you. Because he was just overwhelmed with people. The guy had like 40 years of sobriety or something. But anyway, the point being that you don't stop, you don't finish the 12 steps, finish the first 11 steps before you start helping people with step 12. I recommend, look at Bill Wilson, 6 months of sobriety. Dr. Bob had 3 days of sobriety when he and Bill helped Bill Dobson. Can you say that he was done with the 12 steps in those 3 days? That he wasn't even done detoxing, in my opinion. But he stayed sober, never drank again. Can you say that Bill Dobson, with a few days of sobriety under his belt, and the same thing with all the people, that they were 2 weeks, that one of the things that made the Cleveland group the biggest group of AA's expansion, it came from Akron, Ohio, spawned the Cleveland group, but even Akron and New York both admitted through Bill and Bob that Cleveland was the one that was largely responsible for the expansion of Alcoholics Anonymous. When it came to Dallas and Miami and Atlanta and all the other cities that sprung up after those first 3, Cleveland was the third group that sprang up after New York. But then they asked themselves, they said, why has Cleveland got literally thousands of people that they sobered up, and we're still in the hundreds in AA in New York and in Akron, where it was founded and made in New York and Akron? Why are these 2 groups only sprouting hundreds of people that are sober, and Cleveland has got thousands, and they have other cities that have been directly connected to it? Because Cleveland was assigning sponsees when they came through the door. The Cleveland group said, They were so overwhelmed. They only had like 3 guys who had 2 years of sobriety, and they started assigning people as they can walk through the door. They said, new guy, you're next in line. You got 2 weeks of sobriety. You help this guy through the door. And they're all doing the same thing. They're going, I don't know anything. Well, neither did we when we started. That's how you learn. You got to get out there and do it, right? You got to start sponsoring people. How are you ever going to get to be a master at sponsoring people if you don't start as that guy who didn't know a damn thing about what he was doing? So the moral of the story being, when he says here, what we have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. We're going with all of these steps into step 12. Remember that. I don't want to go any further. We'll open up the floor for open discussion, and we got maybe not plenty of time. We usually only have like 4 people in here, so.